So usually you have the before you start some information that's helpful to you. And we do know that um, students would have both a Windows or Mac OS. Some students would also have Linux, right? But it should be similar to Mac OS, as both are Unix-based environments. Okay. Anytime you don't understand any of the steps, you can consult your classmates. So think of this in the workplace. You no, before consulting your classmate. So try this, and if you can't, try to look in the internet. For us, we call it Googling. Maybe in your China would be using Baidu, right? Try to Google first because that's usually how people work in tech. They try to resolve their own problem first. If they spend like 30 minutes or maybe 40 minutes, couldn't figure it out, maybe that's the time you ask your friend to ask, how can I proceed? How can I go to the next step? And then if that doesn't help, that's the time you ask for TA, right? On the CDU side, like MinQ would be here to assist you as well, and also your instructor, right? So first, search in the internet, ask your friend, then ask for TA or instructor. Okay, so we'll be using Kali Linux, right? Based from the definition alone, it says Kali Linux is a Debian-based Linux distribution, right? Again, just a reminder, this is not yet the lecture. This is just helping you guys with the hands-on practice. Okay, so Kali Linux is used for penetration testing and security auditing, right? So we do have Linux, and Linux is another operating system. Okay, and basically in Linux, there's a lot of different flavors, right? If you can see, they call it Linux distros or distributions. And let's see if there's a visualization for that one. Let's see this one. So in security, it's very important to know the different operating systems so we know how to defend, assess, and even attack if necessary. So now we're focusing on the Linux operating system. Okay, so the Linux operating system has major, what you call this, major categories, right? So a while ago you heard about Debian. Debian is here, and even Debian has a lot of different flavors. Okay, when I say different flavors, an app basically has a different version and it keeps evolving on different types of, let's say, Linux based or Debian based operating system. So if you can see Debian here, let's see. So one of the popular ones, as you can see in this graph, I hope everyone is seeing this properly. Let me know if not. Like Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a very popular Debian based Linux operating system, right? Let's go up. Let's go down. Let's see if we can find Kali Linux here. Yep, as you can see from Debian, it basically branched off to from Nopex, which is it's not that popular, right? And you can see that it branched out until it became Kali, like from Backtrack, from Auditor Security Linux, and now Kali is the most popular one, right? And again, because most of these are open source, when you say open source, we can see the code. The contributors could come from any part of the world. So there's a good and bad thing. Good thing is you would get a lot of contributors to work on the software. However, if that software loses interest and no one is adding code or even maintaining the code base, now that type of Linux would be gone in due time, right? And as you can see, some of the lines have stopped, right? What it means is it's no longer being supported, right? As you can see, Kali Linux is still currently supported, right? 2020 is not yet done. That's why there's no line yet. So as you can see, a lot of different flavors sprout out, but not everyone live long life. Okay, so that is a part of the definition of like what is a Linux based, a Debian based Linux distribution. Okay, and then why again Kali? Because again with Kali, you just install that, right? Once you install that, you already have a lot of tools for penetration testing. In this class, I know we don't really have a virtual environment where we can attack, but at least we can explore different commands for executing Linux, right? If you went into the cybersecurity program track, you'll definitely be exposed to more virtual labs where you can really simulate an attack or simulate a defense. Okay. All right, so Kali Linux, and you guys can access this internet if possible, and you can see more about what is Kali Linux, right? And we did mention the backtrack Linux, right? So it came from this graph. Okay. Open source. Okay. And let me know if anyone has questions. Don't forget, just unmute. I'm fine with that. Let's go back. So the setup. So you guys would have your own personal computer, laptop, right? The setup should basically be using a Windows operating system or a Mac OS or a Linux OS, right? Then on top of that, you would basically install a hypervisor. And the hypervisor, this is not a common name, but the hypervisor is the one that runs a virtual machine, right? Virtual machines, the popular ones are VirtualBox and VMware. And in this case, we'll be using VirtualBox. Send that link as well. So once we have our hypervisor that can run virtual machines, we can basically have another operating system to work on top of our host operating system. So meaning if I have the computer, let's say you have a hardware, a host operating system, right? And now you put the hypervisor enables you to run another operating system. I'll give you an example. For example, I have a game that can only run on Mac OS, but I have Windows OS. A way that I can get around with it is installing a hypervisor in my Mac OS, right? And then inside of that VirtualBox, which is a proper name, VirtualBox, I can install a Windows OS and then several other Windows app on top of that, right? And now that's basically what we're gonna do. If you look at the right hand side, we do have the hardware. Let's say you have your Windows or Mac OS, and then you put the virtual box, which is the hypervisor, and now you can install the Kali Linux. So two steps: install the virtual box, and then install the Kali Linux. So what is VirtualBox? Again, it's called Hypervisor. It's a virtualization software project, right? Again, you're creating something virtually, right? You're trying to um, say to the operating system that I can have another layer that I can put another operating system. Okay. So why does VirtualBox matter? Um, if you are in an organization, right, and you have to spin up many operating systems because you need many servers, right? Instead of buying a computer for each server, you can have a computer with a virtual box, let's say with very high memory and very high storage space. And now you can basically add a lot of different operating system there and make your users in your organization use it. Okay. It could also make rent it out for others to use, like the cloud, right? So like Amazon Web Services, Alibaba, I think what I don't know if it's called Alibaba Cloud, right? Okay, hypervisor, we already mentioned that, right? So there's some videos here as well that you guys can look at on your time. It basically shows you the same thing with animation. Oh yeah, so this is blocked. So because this is not my own video this time around. So let's see if we can just show you some pictures. Maybe close some tabs because it's eating a lot of resources. And close more, close this, and maybe close this as well. Oops, I think I closed the other one. Let's try that again. Okay, I won't play the audio. I'll just show you some pictures, right? You have one hardware and you have your VMware virtualization layer, which is in our case, we're using VirtualBox virtualization layer. And now we can add as many operating system as we want, as long as your hardware or your host operating system has that capacity, right? Because again, we already answered. Nowadays, our hardware has a lot of processing power because it's very cheap, right? So instead of like having one powerful computer and no one else is using it, we can use virtualization to maximize it and let other users, machines, to use it, right? Now, to note that virtualization creates a virtual hardware. Okay, so now you would think that, let's say I'm using my Mac OS right now, I'm using my mouse and keyboard, right? When you put up a virtualization and I put Windows OS on that one or Kali Linux, it would also create a virtual hardware so that it maps to my same mouse and keyboard. Okay, so you can see again host operating system and a virtualization layer, right? And two guest operating systems. So again, there are pros for doing this one, meaning advantages, right? Ability to move, copy, and isolate VMs. One of the thing is maybe you'd want to mess around a Windows operating system. You can spin up a VM, put Windows operating system, and mess around with that. And if you destroy it, it's fine because it's just sitting on top of your virtual layer. You can just remove this or reboot or refresh or reinstall without any problems at all. Okay, I think that's all for the video that's important. And as we have mentioned, there are two different architectures, right? You have the traditional and the virtual. And the traditional way is just one stack, right? Each layer is one stack. So it's just one stack, right? In virtual architecture, you can have the same first two layers and have different operating system stack. Okay. And these are some of the videos, which again, it's in YouTube. So I send it over. If you need this, I can send it again. Um, but we can quickly show you the steps instead. For example, Windows and then Kali Linux, just to give you guys a glimpse. So again, you start off going to the website, fairly easy, right? And once you're in the website, you download it and run. You install. This should be pretty straightforward in Mac OS as well. And now you should have an interface like this with the penguin, with the plus, the new, the tools, and it should be called Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager. Now, once you have that, you would have an application to run your virtualization, right? And now you need to go to Kali Linux to basically download that operating system, right? Now, once you have that operating system, this is just downloading it. Once you have that, you basically would just have the virtual box open and follow the steps, allocating storage size and memory size so that once you are inside Kali Linux, it's usable. Because let's say if you just put 1 gig on your Kali Linux, it might become super slow. So maybe put 4 gigabytes, right? If you have a 16 gigabyte, maybe put 8 gigabyte. No worries. After the whole class for 2 weeks, you are free to uninstall and remove everything, and it should not damage your original operating system. That's why virtualization is a good playground. Okay, this is just going through the steps, and then after that one, you would have a separate screen that would show you the guest operating system. In this case, I think it was a bit slow because I allocated a very small memory, right? It would ask you a few questions just for initial setup and root access privileges, okay? And once you are there, partition, and then you should have this cool dragon logo, right? And that's basically Kali Linux loading up. And now you would have its interface. Now once you have this, you have your environment up and running, and you should be able to start working on your hands-on practice. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Feel free to post that in the chat where I can look at it if I do a pause, right? Just to set up expectation, it is quite normal for students to maybe spend a day or so, maybe also being delayed on how having their environment set up. That's totally fine. We understand that that happens. That also happens at work, where I have helped other developers set their development environment, and it would take several days to just get the same technology stack. Okay, so once you have the environment set up, you should be able to just progress through the other hands-on practices, aka hops. Okay, and knowing the basic Linux commands is very helpful. Whether you're going through software development, whether you're going to DevOps, which is IT and development merged, or you're going through cybersecurity, because most of again, most servers are built in the cloud. Like, and there's even a meme. What are clouds made of? I think. And then let's put, yeah. So here's a very common uh, meme or joke, right? That they're saying that, Daddy, what are clouds made of? Linux servers mostly. When we are just consumers of Windows OS or Mac OS, but in reality, most of these websites or web applications that we access, such as Facebook or not Facebook, maybe QQ or maybe RunRun or maybe Weibo or maybe what's the I forgot the other ones, right? The Tencent, right? So all of those, they their apps is running on somewhere. It's running on a machine. It's running on a computer, and most of the time, the operating system that it's running on, it's a Linux operating system. A Linux operating system that can be many different flavor, right? So just going back, right, when we mentioned Linux has many different flavors, think of it like your Windows operating system has many different flavors or versions as well. You would have Windows 7, Windows 10, Windows 95, Windows 2003, Windows XP. Same with Mac OS as well. You have Catalina, Mojave, and those other operating system version names. Okay, so even cloud providers like Amazon Web Services, they created their own Amazon-based Amazon Linux machines. So they still derive it, or it still came from Linux operating system. Okay, so as you work in the tech field, right, you always try to click on stuff. Let's say this is a graphical user interface, right? For now, it is maybe easier to click around stuff and access what we want, right? But once we try to do it many times, it becomes very inefficient. And tech workers tend to move away from graphical user interface if possible, and then open up a command line interface. In Mac OS, this is called the terminal. In other Unix based or again Linux based operating system, it is also called the terminal. And you would have a similar terminal like this. And hold on, let me open up. So a while ago, I was mentioning, click that, share screen. I'll just do that, would show both, but again, this is like the graphical user interface where you can just interact, right? But as it becomes inefficient, you want to now use a terminal, right, to access your stuff, right? So if I want to access the things on my desktop, I can go desktop, right, and just allow that for now, and do a ls, meaning list everything, and I can see all the stuff in my desktop as well. And I can quickly open up some of the files. For example, I have this new text. I can check on these stuff, make some edit, close it out, right? I can basically do version control or deployment of apps, anything you can do, uh, everything you can do with a graphical user interface, able to do it in a command line interface. So going back to our HOP1, so these are one of the things that is not um, is already expected in work. They don't really ask you, but they expect to execute commands, right? Again, in Windows, you would have different commands, but once you have your Kali, it should be the same, right? And in any technology, it's always important to check the documentation. Um, the command man means manual, gives us access to that. If you're using different types of tools as well, let's say a programming language such as Python, you can also access its manual like a help. If all else fails, it's easier to just search the internet to check on those how to use that specific technology or command, right? So these are provided like these, like a manual page, and I'll just do a 1 minute pause to see if anyone has any thoughts